Okay, gang. Just to kind of give you what we got going on right now. Okay, I'm going live just a smidge early because I know you guys, for whatever reason, it takes you like 10 minutes to figure out that I'm live, and then you all come in. Uh, Ryan has about an hour to give to us tonight, so I want to make the most of that time. I want to make sure as many people get to see that live as they can, in case they want to ask questions, make super chats, etc. Right? When he gets here, I will put on my starting student screen again just to make sure his mic and audio work. So bear with me for a moment on that. And then we'll just get right into it, right? I've got a lot of topics to cover, okay? Just kind of like a preview for you guys who are here. We're going to talk about Trump and his handling of Ukraine. We're going to talk about Ukraine in general, the state of play over there. We're going to talk about America's position on the world stage in regards to our allies, our enemies, the conflicts that we are involved or not involved in, what we should be involved in, what we shouldn't be involved in, etc. NATO, etc. And we're also talking about information warfare, what that looks like in the modern era, how we should be waging that kind of thing, etc. Who is Ryan McBeth? I'll let him introduce himself when he gets here, but just so you know, he is a intelligence guy. He's an intel guy. He has a pretty big YouTube channel. He is a commentator for Newsmax, as well as an author. He's written a short story called Warlock and a book called The Wind Machine, which you can check out on Amazon, right? Cool guy. I really like his stuff. I'm really eager to kind of pick his brain. Is he the fat guy who smokes cigars? I don't know if he smokes cigars. I don't. He's a little on the heavier side, but we don't judge. But yeah, so at this point, what we're doing is we're waiting on him. But he gets in here, I'll set him up, and we'll get it going. Are there any questions? Right? Anything like that? Short Stack Goblin says, Wick, Ryan is great, much better than all your normal guests. He's a good guy, at least from my viewing of his interactions with others, right? I saw him on the Bridges podcast initially. That's how I was initially introduced to the man. And I've seen him in several other venues, and I've watched a few of his videos. He knows what he's talking about, and I am very eager to finally get someone who knows what they're talking about on my show. This is great for me. I really want it. So let me make sure. I told him to be here about 5 minutes early. I gave him the link to my stuff, making sure he hasn't tried to DM me on something, right? So give me a moment. Okay. So yeah, we're just waiting on the guy to get here. How's everyone? Like I said, I'm going live a smidge early. Because again, I know it takes you guys a bit to kind of get in here. But yeah. When he does, I'll drag him in, and we will start the show. Audacity says, I've watched him for a while, split off when it seemed like he was doing commentary for commentary's sake. Israeli pager bombs, yada yada. Okay. Well, I like the guy still. Commentary for commentary's sake. I don't know precisely what you mean. But fair. I mean, we all have our things. Jeff Lewis says, gotta do my stoutness exercises. What are your stoutness exercises? Update on Sisters of Battle. Slow and steady wins the race. We're getting there. Okay. Slava Ukraini. Yes, exactly. Men can do kegels as well, Wick? Yeah, probably. I hope daylight savings time didn't get us, right? 6 Eastern is still 6 Eastern. Correct? I won't be worried. I won't be worried till it's like 5 minutes after, okay? I understand he's a busy man. Got a lot to do. Old School says, hi, Wick, taking a break from the very important neural network project to see how you're doing. So far, so good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, he has arrived. Let me make sure that he has the right settings here. And we will get him set up. Cool, cool. Server settings. Members. Here, I will add his role. You should be able to see everything. And when he gets here. Again, once again, I will put the starting student screen on, make sure his audio, etc. works, and then we'll get in here. Cool? Cool. We'll be with you in a minute. Hello.
Hey.
Hey.
Is the video on?
Let's see if it works. I can hear you, which is probably the most important part of this endeavor.
I don't like that video. How do I change my...
Well, I'm not sure. Do you want to change your setting, or do you want to change the view, or?
How do I change my camera?
Okay, there should be a button, a little arrow, if you look down at the bottom, next to the camera icon, and if you click that arrow, it will allow you to change it.
Alright, I guess we're using this one.
Okay. So, we aren't, no one can see or hear us yet. I just kind of want to give you the lowdown.
Smoke?
Huh?
And if I smoke?
Do what you want. It's your house, right? But no, so I will start off. I'll let you introduce yourself, and then we'll just kind of get on in it. Any questions before we go live?
Nah, I'm just gonna get a drink.
Okay, go ahead. Oh, could you guys hear us? Oops. Yeah, those chatters. I hate them too. They're really, really bad. What's your favorite slur? Okay, well, welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of Wick TV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together, talk about issues both political and cultural from the silly to serious. We have a very special guest with us today. Ryan McBeth has graciously agreed to join us and allow me to pick his brain a little bit on the state of play when it comes to Ukraine and America's position on the world stage. He is a Newsmax contributor as well as an author of The Wind Machine, which you can find on Amazon, right? There should be links in my YouTube description if you want to check that out. But Ryan, how you doing today? What's going on? How are you feeling?
Been an interesting day. Looks like there might be a ceasefire in Ukraine, or at least Ukraine has tentatively agreed to a ceasefire. Now military support's being restored. Now how Russia reacts to that, we don't know. Right?
Yeah,
we don't know whether Russia's going to agree to that or not.
Yeah, I was just reading up on this a couple hours ago, and I guess that's my first question for you at this time, right? Like, what are the chances that Russia is going to agree to this ceasefire? Do you think that they will accept it? Are they going to play footsie with it? What's your read on this?
That's a good question, because Russia hasn't met all of their goals. Their goal is to take Ukraine and then eventually take the Baltics, then take Poland, and that takes a 600-mile border down to like a 150-mile border. It's always been their goal, like since day one. So I don't know. I don't know how a ceasefire actually helps them. Helps the Ukrainians more, because then we get to turn Ukraine into a porcupine. We just keep dumping weapon systems in there. Um, so I really don't know. My gut feeling is that they won't accept it.
Okay.
Mainly because they haven't met all their objectives yet. And some people might say, well, they'll do it, and then they'll rebuild their military and try it again. That's possible. That's only possible if we remove sanctions from Russia.
Do you
They have
think
to
we
have a
will?
place to sell their. What's that?
Do you think we will? So, I guess
Right.
Trump has talked about like lifting and easing sanctions if Russia were to play ball. So, if they were to agree to the ceasefire, do you think Trump will just start lifting those immediately, or do you think he'll wait to see if they sustain the 30 days before he starts doing that? What do you think will happen?
That's a good question. My gut feeling is that, and I just did a video about it literally today. I just posted it. It's that the U.S. needs to start moving troops over to China. We have 84,000 in Europe right now.
Oh, your camera died
Did I just
and your
blink
mic
out?
switched. They got you.
Oh, yeah, apparently. So let me try turning on the camera again. There we go. So the whole idea here is that if we can move our troops out of Europe and then to maybe bases in the Philippines or Australia, and Europe can kind of take care of its own backyard, and ideally, what we want is some sort of peace or ceasefire or something, because the nightmare scenario is that Russia collapses. And Russia is basically out of armored vehicles at this point. Now, they're never going to be out of armored vehicles in the sense that they don't have a single armored vehicle left in the inventory. But if you watch videos like Covert Cabal that use satellite imagery over Russia, um, they've counted tanks. They physically counted tanks and armored personnel carriers. And essentially, Russia is out of armored vehicles built during the Cold War that could easily be refurbished. What that means is instead of a Russian tank company having 12 tanks, maybe it has 7, maybe it has 6. So within the next year or so, it's going to be very difficult for Russia to continue fielding its military with equipment. And I think what the administration is afraid of is that Russia collapses because they can't sustain their military and they can't sustain the economics. And then you have Babylon AD, where Russia devolves into multiple warlord states, some of whom have nuclear weapons. Now, the permissive action links, those keys to actually activate those nuclear weapons, those are controlled from Moscow. So you can't just take the nuclear weapon and explode it.
Certainly.
But it's still not a good situation to be in. So I think what the US is afraid of is that Russia might collapse 2026, 2027, while we're trying to build up to fight China. And now we got to go back to Europe and worry about a collapsing Russia, maybe even try to secure some of those nuclear weapons. So, and I, when I made my video today, I paraphrased Abraham Lincoln, who said, if I could save the Union by freeing all the slaves, I would. If I could save the Union by freeing none of the slaves, I would. If I could save the Union by freeing some of the slaves and leaving others alone, I would. And I think we're at the point where if we can save Ukraine by saving Ukraine, we will. If we allow Russia to win, we will. And if we allow Russia to keep some land and Ukraine has to give some up, we will.
Okay. So do you think
The
go ahead.
whole point is to end the war so that we can move troops out of Europe and prepare for China.
And your view on the situation, your read of the situation is the administration really doesn't care how it ends as long as it doesn't lead to a kind of like a hard fracture of Russia
Yeah.
to break up into like warring tribes and states.
Yeah.
With
So in
that,
a case like that, we have to allow these, we have to reduce sanctions against Russia. I'm not sure if that's something the president can do unilaterally,
okay.
whether it requires a vote from Congress. I'm not familiar with the political process for that, but sanction relief has to be a part of that because If Russia stopped the war tomorrow and started sending troops home, now you have a whole bunch of troops who know how to use guns and they don't have a job. And granted, weapons laws in Russia are a little bit different than the US. You can still buy a gun, but that's gun laws have never stopped revolutionaries from purchasing weapons or from getting weapons, getting
True.
their hands on weapons. So what Putin doesn't want is to end up hung upside down outside of a gas station like Mussolini,
Mm,
getting the Ceausescu special. He doesn't want either of those scenarios, which could happen if Russia doesn't have a soft landing. And in order to have that soft landing, the sanctions need to be removed from Russia. I think
interesting.
that's the end state. I don't know how long that'll take, but I believe that is the end state.
The goal of the administration is to provide a soft landing for Putin, so it doesn't turn into chaos. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Europe's response to this as well, because they are kind of
Okay.
players in the game. Do they want the same thing as the Trump administration here? Um, it from reading some of the speeches that European leaders have given, such as Macron,
Did,
it
I,
seems to be. Oh, go ahead.
did my thing go off again?
No, you're
No, it's
still
still
here.
there. Okay.
You're still here.
All right. Go on. Go
No,
on. Keep going. I'm sorry.
it's fine. It's fine. So it seems to be like leaders such as Macron, right? Are at least uh they're giving a voice. I don't know if they're actually do it to kind of getting more involved in supporting Ukraine, more involved in directly opposing Russia militarily, ramping up production. There's even been talk about sending peacekeeping troops there, etc. How likely do you think that it is that Europe will kind of pick up the slack that the U.S. has kind of left out? And
Yeah.
do you think that they also will have that kind of same goal as the U.S. administration of giving Putin a soft landing? What do you think?
I don't think they have a choice. You know,
What do you mean by that?
well, by that I mean that what we're gonna see is if the United States has relieved sanctions, you got all of that Russian oil and gas that Europe could sure as heck use. So why wouldn't you relieve sanctions on your own? Why wouldn't Europe also do this? Right. Um, I do believe that Europe might send peacekeepers. And if there is, let's say, a 30-day ceasefire, that would be a perfect opportunity for Europe to establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine. They have the capability to do that. They have the fighters. They have the AWACS, the airborne early warning control planes that can patrol. They just have to have the will to do it. And that's just kind of that's kind of the thing there. I think that's why you see both Britain and France talking about sending peacekeepers,
Mm-hmm.
because they're both nuclear armed countries, and it would be a lot more difficult to attack a nuclear armed country than it would be, let's say, Poland.
Certainly, I know that France at least has talked about extending their what do they call it, nuclear umbrella, a little bit.
Yeah, like giving or leasing
Yeah.
or transferring ownership some of their nuclear weapons to Germany or maybe Poland.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean you slap a bomb on a fighter and you're good to go. There's a whole certification thing you got to do. The fighters have to be rated to carry these nuclear weapons. You need to put the software inside the plane to actually use the permissive action link in order to actually activate the nuclear weapon. So it's a lot more complicated. These nuclear weapons aren't locked with a bike lock, right?
Certainly.
You could theoretically detonate a nuclear weapon without a code from the permissive action link, but it wouldn't detonate correctly, and you just might get a fizzle, right? So it's certainly possible that Britain might do that. I don't know how willing Germany is to take on nuclear weapons. Maybe. I know that they just recently shut down their nuclear plants. The Green Party was a big thing there. There are people who don't like the idea of nuclear energy, much less nuclear weapons. So it's possible, but there's going to be a lot of cognitive leaps to take before they get to that point.
Okay. So On that note, right, and I'll just
Mhm.
ask you this straight: can Ukraine still win this war?
No one's going to win this war. I've said this in God so many friggin' times. There's no win. There's lose and lose less. Russia loses and Ukraine loses. The only question is who's going to lose less. Right? So by win, Ukraine is not going to drive to Moscow and they're going to sign a surrender agreement in Red Square.
Fair
That's
enough.
that's not going to happen. At the same time, at Russia's current pace, I think I estimated that they would take over all of Ukraine in 72 years. So we're not going to see a surrender document, underneath that statue in Kyiv. But it is theoretically possible because remember, Ukraine hasn't even tapped into its under 25-year-olds for the draft. They're also performing a lot of attacks with robots. And just fairly recently, they had their first all robotic attack where robots actually attacked Russian positions and gained ground.
Are we talking about robots or drones or what's?
Well, they're drones, but they're
Okay.
remotely controlled drones.
Okay.
So you
Okay.
might have a ground vehicle that's actually controlled by a data link from an airborne drone.
Oh,
That way you
okay.
get non-line of sight. You can go across non-line of sight.
Yeah. Okay. I
So
get what you're
that's
saying now.
certainly a possibility. Um, but it's theoretically possible. So the way Ukraine could take back their territory is number one, they have to establish air dominance. That's something that they might be able to do with the F-16 and the new Mirage. They're not getting that many Mirages. Mirage is going to be more like a Storm Shadow launch platform. Now, with the F-16, you can establish air dominance. And once you establish air dominance, then you can start using JDAMs or Joint Direct Attack munitions to drop bombs on bunkers. The reason Ukraine's counteroffensive failed in 2023 was that they didn't have air superiority. Breaching a minefield is hard. Try doing it with people shooting anti tank missiles at you and then attack helicopters come in. That makes it harder. But if you have air dominance, that means no attack helicopters, and that means you can drop bombs on bunkers where people are firing anti-tank missiles. Once you do that, it is easier to actually breach defenses. So theoretically, Ukraine could probably take back Zaporizhia, um, the maybe Donetsk and Luhansk. It's certainly possible if they can take Zaporizhia and drive all the way to the sea. Then now you cut Crimea. You can somehow take out the Kerch Strait Bridge as well. Then all the forces on Crimea have to be resupplied by boat, which makes things a lot harder. So it's theoretically possible. It's going to take another 2, 3, 4 years.
That's a long time. And within
War is
this,
hard.
yeah, with
I mean, World War II took 4 years,
certainly,
right?
right. Yeah, no,
It
I,
took
I get
four
what you're
years.
saying. I get what you're saying. And this is all happening.
Longer,
Oh,
6 years if you're Britain, right?
fair, fair. This is all happening in the context of the Trump administration. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the. I'm sure I saw your video covering it as well, right? So we won't go too in depth, right? The Trump and Zelensky presser, the conference, things like that. Oh, I guess my first question is, do you think that this was an ambush by JD Vance and other elements within the Trump administration who just seem, at least to me, want to cut off Ukraine aid just completely? Do you think this was like premeditated, or do you think this was just like a cascading comedy of errors, if you will, by the behaviors of the people involved?
I don't know enough about politics to really speak to that. I'm more of a weapons guy.
Okay.
It could just be as simple as you have JD Vance who wants to prove himself to his base. He wants a memorable moment, and as President Trump said, it was good
Yeah.
television, and that might be kind of where we're at right now. that we're looking at things in terms of how can we own the libs, how can we have good television, when this really isn't a liberal or a conservative view. This is a freedom view. And I think a lot of the whole anti-Ukraine thing happened because it was something President Biden was for. So if President Biden was for it, we have to be against it, right?
Do you
And
think
I
it's as
also think
simple as
that,
that though? I mean, that seems like I mean, I get what you're saying, right? Like it's libs versus people who want to own the libs. Um,
yeah,
but I don't know that it almost seems too easy of an answer. Does that make sense?
well, I mean, look, if I've often said that the reason Russia does disinformation is that it's a lot cheaper than using weapon systems, right? So let's say if you want to prevent 155 millimeter shells from being sent to Ukraine, there's a couple of ways you could do it. The first way is Russia could launch several cruise missiles at the shell factory in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Russia has the capability to do that. They have bombers, they have caliber cruise missiles. They could theoretically fly to the Arctic Circle, fire a couple of cruise missiles, maybe some would get through. But the result would be the United States could actually enter the war on the side of Ukraine. And Russia does not want to fight NATO. They're terrified of fighting NATO because they can barely beat Ukraine. So that's one way of doing it. The second way of doing it would be to pay a saboteur. Oh, here's some money. When you go into work, flip this switch, damage production. That would stop shells from being sent to Ukraine. But if the saboteur is caught, Russia gets blamed, NATO could enter the war. But if you use information war to convince people that these shells are actually ending up in Mexico in the hands of the cartel, you also stop shells from being sent to Ukraine. So I think it was within Russia's best interest to convince people that Ukraine is corrupt, President Biden is going to cause World War III, and this is an information war way of getting people to abandon Ukraine. When ideally, as Americans, we should always be on the side of freedom.
How much
That
of
freedom has no, political affiliation. Democrats believe in freedom, Republicans believe in freedom, independents believe in freedom. We should be believing in freedom, right?
well, the question it's like the Civil War meme, right? Where the guy's like, well, what do you mean by freedom, right? Like when you say freedom, what kind of freedom are you for? And I think that's where we're kind of getting a lot of the back and forth in America, at least in American politics, is what does freedom mean when it comes, like when the rubber meets the road, how does freedom manifest for us as citizens? And what does it look like on the world stage? There's a lot of people who I've talked to on my show and just in my life who see no benefit to supporting Ukraine at all, like for America specifically. They're like, so what? Why do I care? I work my job 9 to 5, I pay taxes. Ukraine, that's across the globe. What does it matter? How would you answer someone who had that kind of way of thinking?
Absolutely. So, one of the benefits that we're getting from Ukraine is JTAC. It's this joint school that's in Poland. Ukrainian soldiers are working at JTAC, and basically, intelligence from how they're conducting the war, the mistakes they've made, the things they've done right, all of that information gets passed over to Poland. And so we're learning how to fight the next war essentially for free because Ukraine has already made all those mistakes. Now we get that information. Another thing we're getting out of this is we're getting information on how our missile systems work and how our weapons perform. Patriot system has performed really well. The Gimlers and HIMARS systems have performed really well. The some of the GPS guided weapon systems that God, I can't remember the darn name for it, but it's an artillery shell. It's guided by GPS, or it's a HIMARS system. When you fire it, a glide bomb kind of pops out of the shell and kind of can glide to the target. That hasn't performed well. So we've gotten all this data on how our weapon systems perform in real life. So there's that. And then, another thing that we've kind of gotten out of that is we now have an ally who I guarantee you, when this war is over, Ukraine will become the predominant robotic drone manufacturer in the world because they have all this experience with it. So we can take a look at their weapon systems, maybe buy some of them, or figure out how to turn our weapon systems robotic and maybe even unmanned the way Ukraine has. So there's a lot of advantages that we're getting from supporting this country who's never they've never asked for troops. They've asked for people to come join their legion. They've never asked anyone to fight for them. However, they have asked for weapons. Just give us the tools we need to finish the fight and defend our country. And oh, fourth thing, really. Fourth thing that we get is we got rid of all of our old stuff. The Patriot missiles that they have, the rocket fuel in those missiles expires. You have two choices. You can fire them yourself in training, or you can send them back to the factory and have them demilled. And that in some cases that can cost more than actually buying the missile because it's hazardous waste.
Okay.
There's only a limited number of days in the training calendar. So it's not like if you're a Patriot battery, you just go out to White Sands and just fire Patriots all day, right? You can't do that. But you can send those old weapons to Ukraine, and they can fire them and defend their country.
Yeah.
Essentially any missile, the fuel in them expires. Artillery rounds expire too, but at a slower rate.
Sure.
Our old equipment, M113s, our old Bradleys, some of our older M1 tanks, they've been sent to Ukraine. Bradleys have been used to great effect. We give them our old stuff, and the M113s, which are armored personnel carriers, it's basically just a cracker box with 4 centimeters of aluminum armor. Great battle taxi. It's a great way of getting to and from the battlefield. We're dumping them in the ocean.
Really?
We take the engines out. We clear it of all the chemicals and toxins and
The
stuff
hazardous
that could
stuff.
hurt the
Yeah, yeah,
fish. And then we dump it in the ocean to create artificial reefs. I like fish. I think scuba diving is a good thing. But we're taking these things and we're cleaning them up and dumping them in the ocean. It's cheaper to send them to Ukraine where they can be used. So why not do that? Right? We're actually saving money. And then when we reduce our stockpiles, those weapon systems get replaced by newer stuff that we have to buy anyway, and that means American jobs. So everybody wins except the Russians, which is the ideal outcome.
Well, there's yes, I agree with you 100%, right? But I've heard people say, well, it's just a meat grinder. What we're doing. Elon Musk has said this time and time again on
Mhm.
to millions and millions of people, right? That this is simply just prolonging the war. It's causing more death. There's no way Ukraine can win, and they should simply just go for peace. And he doesn't really qualify what that means, right? But just stop the
Yeah.
fighting, go to peace, etc. Let's talk about misinformation a little bit when we come to this. Would you consider Elon Musk a purveyor of misinformation?
Yes.
What should be done about that, if anything?
I don't know if we can do anything about it. I mean, look, freedom of speech even extends to lying, right? I guess the best way of fixing it is to stop listening. When you look at Tesla stock, I own a Tesla, best car I've ever owned. When you look at Tesla stock, when you have people who were rabid Tesla owners, I think at least 20% of people, I might be mistaking this figure, but I want to say 20% of Tesla owners agree that their next car will only be a Tesla, and that's down to 8% now.
When your politics hits your pocketbook, that's when you might start thinking maybe this is a bad idea. And I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the stock market today. It's been really, really
Don't.
depressing.
It's bad.
I'm not even
It's
trying to get rich. I just want
sea of
to.
red. Okay.
I just
But
want to buy some eggs. You know, I just want to buy some eggs. Um, but when I look at the stock market, which was down again today, and I'm actually just looking at it right now. Dow is down 1.4%. S&P 500's down 0.76. When you look at that, and just wealth just kind of evaporates because of a couple of decisions. Uh, I'm sure Elon Musk might be looking at his Tesla stock, going, I liked it when I had $100 million. You know, um, maybe I shouldn't say stuff like this anymore. Now, maybe he's so wealthy, $100 million doesn't mean anything to him, right?
yeah, I mean, like,
But
what's 100
yeah,
mil when you
I
have
would
like,
love I would love to get to that point. I've often said, like, as a YouTuber, I'm famous, not rich. Like that. I'm famous, not rich. And like, my God, I never buy anything. You never see me do like, hey, here's the new whatever I bought. Here's the new watch I bought. Like,
yeah,
I have two nice watches, and that's plenty. Um, I'm actually concerned about retirement. I'm 50. I'm 50. I bought this house I bought this house last year because my rent was going to be. They did two things. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland. I was living in an apartment. I liked my apartment. 2-bedroom apartment is enough. It cost me $2,700 a month. They were going to raise my rent to $3,200 a month, and they banned smoking on the balconies.
all those bastards. Okay.
And I'm like, why am I paying you guys? And a house that I found, now I'm paying like a $2,700 a month mortgage. So I'm paying as much as I did renting, and I'm building equity. So, but I'll tell you something, man, buying that house, Jesus, it is, the washing machine breaks. Oh,
Shit.
you can't call the super. You gotta get a washing machine. I guess that is the one bad thing when you join the military. You know, um, you're 20 years behind building equity, right? When buying a house. And with my mortgage, I'm going to be paying for this house when I'm 80, which is just like such a,
It's a
going to
lot.
be 80, I'll pay it
Debt
off
is
when I'm 90,
crazy.
79 years old.
70. Wow. That's yeah.
Which is, it's crazy to me.
Well, assuming we
Right.
don't have World War III and it doesn't matter anymore, right? Because the bombs fall and we all die. But let's talk about that a little bit because you mentioned you're kind of being a YouTuber and kind of being well known, someone who goes on
Yeah.
and is a commentator for like Newsmax and things like that. Um, how has that changed your perspective on things? I guess given that you now have an increased expectation to comment, right, on news of the day, things going on, etc. How do you determine if you are going to actually talk about a thing? Like, what principles do you use to decide whether or not you're actually going to comment on something that happens in the world? Do you prefer to have a good amount of prior knowledge before going into topic, or is it just whatever anyone's talking about? How do you decide these things?
Well, typically I don't talk about stuff I don't know. That's just, that's just kind of a given, right? I never talk about stuff that I don't know or I don't understand. Um, Usually what I'll do is, if there a topic comes up and people really want to know, like, hey, how come this thing is happening? I get about 100 emails a day of people asking me, hey, can you research this, or hey, is this true? Usually for misinformation stuff, that's pretty easy. I can hop right on misinformation. Um, but I can tell you that for other things, like, I don't typically, like, I don't comment on politics. I don't care about that stuff. I don't, like, people have asked me to comment on like Navy stuff. I mean, like, it depends, right? Like, like, I know about aircraft carriers. I know a little bit about destroyers. I know about amphibious landing. You want me to talk about the spy or radar or whatever? Like that's beyond my ability. I need to bring other people in. Misinformation. I'll cover that if like I immediately know. Oh yeah, this is wrong, and here's why. And a lot of that is I have a really good memory. Like I have a really good freaking memory. When the war in Gaza was happening, there was someone who posted a picture saying, "Look, this Israeli girl is writing on this shell, like death to all Palestinians." And I was like, "Wait a minute! I remember that picture from 2006, and the girl was writing on the shell, but she was writing, I was waiting for this moment all my life." That picture is not associated with this conflict. So stuff like that, yeah, I can go after stuff like that. There was another guy who claimed that during the Super Bowl, I think 2 years ago, they made American sailors wear rainbow uniforms and stand on the deck of the carrier. Look, the Navy supports gay rights. Well, the Navy crew, China's laughing at us right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
Well, on the deck of a Navy ship, I've been on the deck of a Navy ship. I've been on the deck of a carrier. Every job has a different vest. Every job has a different shirt you wear. So, like plane handlers, they wear one color. Fuel wears purple. Ammo handlers wear red. People who, plane captains wear a different color. It's just the colors we chose, and China uses the same colors. Like, I know that, so I can make that kind of video and say, no, that's not it at all. This is just what they were wearing that day. And brown, by the way, which is a color on the Navy deck, is not a color of the freaking gay flag. So nor is white, and that's one of the uniforms the plane handlers wear. Oh,
Yeah, on that misinformation topic, right?
yeah.
Because you said a couple things. I guess I have two questions for you. The first is, right, how bad is it really? I hear all the time from various commenters, misinformation is one of the greatest threats we face in the world today, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How accurate is that statement? And the second question I have for you is about, you've talked about treating foreign misinformation centers as potential targets,
Yeah.
military targets in war. Is that still a stance you hold? And how would that apply to domestic misinformation centers? So what I mean by that is, like, as we know, Tenet Media had the recent thing where they tried to funnel money into American podcasters such as Tim Pool and things like that. At what point does Tim Pool become a legitimate target, if any? Go ahead.
Well, if Tim Pool is an American citizen, he's speaking from America, there's not a lot you can do. Free speech is still free speech.
Okay.
But foreign disinformation actors, that's a little bit different. So I've always advocated targeting foreign disinformation actors in the sense that it is no different than working at a munitions plant. If you're a civilian and you're building shells for the enemy, are you a valid target? Damn right you're a valid target. You're working at the munitions plant, you're assembling shells, you're part of the war machine, you can be targeted. If you're working at a disinformation shop and disinformation is being used as a weapon system that can have kinetic effects, good example was the MV Cape Orlando. MV Cape Orlando was a Navy Ready Reserve Fleet ship that was sailing out of the port of Oakland. And basically, Iranian agents through this Instagram and TikTok group convinced people to go glue themselves to the side of the boat because the MV Cape Orlando was carrying weapons to Israel. I don't know if any of these useful idiots looked at a map, but if you were going to sail to Israel, you wouldn't sail out of the port of freaking Oakland on the other side of the continent. But they did it anyway. And so that was a kinetic effect. You had information warfare create a kinetic action. If I guarantee you, when China invades Taiwan, there will be TikTok videos where people are saying Taiwan has always been Chinese, the Taiwanese people and the Chinese people are one. America just wants to use Taiwan for the resources and their capitalist aggression. and you will have useful American idiots block Army deployment sites or glue themselves to Navy ships. So that's a kinetic effector. Misinformation is a kinetic effector. So we need to kill these people. That means we drop a bomb or we initiate a cyber attack against the areas where this is occurring. Now, this could also mean destroying the servers, either through a cyber attack or through some sort of other kinetic method. But absolutely, these people should be targeted. American citizens who are speaking in America, that's a little bit different. You can't really do that because the free speech is still free speech. But if you're a foreign national that's using a weapons platform, well, we can take you out. And I've given speeches about that. I go around to various Army installations and I give this speech laying out my case.
Yeah, this is I think my biggest point of contention I have with you. I understand that there can be circumstances where perhaps that is appropriate, perhaps, but I do worry about the effects that has. Simply because us targeting information centers or misinformation centers becomes a weapon in and of itself. It is used against us. Like, look at those Americans bombing those innocent TikTokers, right? And things like that, right? In China, they're targeting our journalists, etc., right? Gaza has used this to great effect, right? Or Palestine, I should say, in its kind of information war against Israel. It has had a tremendously successful effects at swaying the public. So I do worry about this kind of policy of treating a misinformation center the same as an artillery shell center would have on the public. What would you say to address those concerns that I would have? Right.
Well, like I said, it's a weapons effector, right? So if you have a person who's advocating to glue yourself to the side of a Navy ship so that Navy ship can't leave, well, what's the difference between gluing yourself to the side of a Navy ship and a Special Forces team putting a limpet mine on the side of the ship? The effect is exactly the same. If you have people block a road, let's say, let's block the bridge. Let's block the bridge for China. We're going to block the Golden State Bridge. And now people die because they can't get to the hospital because people are blocking the Golden State Bridge. You just caused casualties. So,
yeah,
what's the difference?
That extends to U.S. citizens, for example, right? I understand that U.S. citizenry free speech is free speech, but if they are engaged, like if a U.S. citizen went to China and started forging artillery shells to be shot at us during our time of war, we would treat that person as a traitor, right? We would treat them as an enemy combatant. Why is that not the case? If everything you just said was true, right? And I don't disagree with some of the, I guess, the table setting you're setting here. Why wouldn't we start to target American journalists who are engaged in these warfare tactics against the U.S. by spreading misinformation purposefully, right? And a lot of them do.
I mean, if they're doing it inside the U.S., again,
yeah, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we?
That's a First Amendment issue, right? And that's kind of sacrosanct. The government isn't supposed to regulate speech. We can encourage people to watch different media, but we can't kill Americans because they have a different way of thinking or they're choosing to speak in a different way.
If an American citizen built a bomb to blow up a U.S. Navy ship, we would kill them. We would target them and stop them from doing that, even if it's in America.
Most likely.
Yes.
That isn't a First Amendment thing.
I understand that, but if your argument is that weapons can be, or words can be weapons just as effective with a kinetic effect, simply like a bomb, right? Doesn't the logic follow that, okay, well, if a weapon can stop a ship and a word can stop a ship, what's the difference?
Well, the difference is that you have an American citizen who's protected by the First Amendment. If you want to change that, we can work on that.
I don't.
That might be a slippery slope by changing the First Amendment to say, you know what, we're allowed to do this if we don't like the thing the person is saying. Doing that to Americans is totally different than doing that to a foreign actor who's being paid by a foreign country to use speech as a weapons effector.
Okay.
That's the difference.
Fair enough.
If you want to go after Americans, well, you got to change the laws. We can change laws. Whether you want to do that or not, whether there's any support for that's a different story.
It would be, in my opinion, a very bad thing to start down that road. But I just worry about the logic that will be used in the future. Let's talk a little bit about the current state of modern warfare. You've been covering Ukraine a lot. You've been looking at these. Your expertise is weapon systems, etc. What are some of the, I think, most important lessons we've learned from Ukraine in regards to that we're going to carry out into modern warfare in the future, conflicts, potentially with China, right, in the future? What do you think?
Spectrum dominance. Spectrum dominance. Spectrum
Explain
dominance.
that. Elaborate.
Spectrum dominance.
My chatters are big dumb. Okay, they need.
So when you look at something like there's only one electromagnetic spectrum, and that electromagnetic spectrum allows us to communicate. It allows us to send voice and data. It allows us to control our drones. If we don't have spectrum dominance, we don't have dominance. We don't have battlefield dominance. So the one takeaway from the war in Ukraine is we need to win the electronic war. We need to dominate the spectrum and deny the spectrum to our adversaries. That's kind of number one. Number two is we need to mask in multiple spectrums. So right now, when we go out into the field, we might cover our vehicles with branches, right? So now it looks like a tank covered in branches, right? But we camouflage. We know, all right, we need to camouflage the tank, right? But the heat from that tank is visible on another spectrum. We need to think about how we're going to camouflage in the infrared spectrum, right? We also need to think about how we're going to camouflage in the radio spectrum. Maybe that means we have our tactical operations center here, and the transmitter for that tactical operations center for the radios is 600 meters away. That could be something as well. Another thing we have to come to realize is that the days of the Taj Mahal talks are over. Back during the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, there was a building in Doha, Qatar, that was filled with, I think, about 200 or so people. The Joint Operations Center, and everything would kind of get filtered through there. If you needed to blow up a building or something like that, you could call the Joint Operations Center, JSOC, and be like, "Hey, are we allowed to hit this building?" And their lawyers would go through it and send the information back down. Today, anything like that's going to be targeted. So any kind of command center we have needs to be mobile, and we need to be constantly moving. So mask in all spectrums, dominate the EW spectrum. Days of the Taj Mahal talk are over. Those are kind of the three takeaways.
Interesting. Okay. I know we have you for an hour and we have about 10 minutes left. My community has some questions that they've super chatted at me. So let's go through a few of these and let's see what we can get to. Okay. 50 SEK from Short Stack Goblin. Thank you for the 50 SEK. Any sanctions lifted by the U.S. to Russia, I will advocate for the EU to apply to the U.S. Good luck in your coward corner. Well, thank you for that. Not really a question, but I appreciate the money. Here's one. $10 from Zephyr Hash. If Russia is indeed so close to collapse, why not use this opportunity to leverage nuclear disarmament to remove the sanctions? Seems like Russia is getting away with a lot just because they have nukes.
Yeah, I mean, that might not be a bad idea. I think the world would be better with fewer nuclear weapons, right? Or maybe the optimum number of nuclear weapons is 10, right? That we could use if Armageddon, got an asteroid coming toward Earth or something like that. You put those nuclear weapons in the care of the United Nations or some external or scientific organization that can control those weapons, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to consider how we can, if not eliminate nuclear weapons, at least reduce them to a manageable level that can be used in any kind of scientific emergency.
Yeah, I don't see that happening, unfortunately, simply because like if Japan and Poland and etc. aren't considering getting nukes yet, they will be soon, right? I think we didn't really get to touch on this too much, but I do worry that the U.S. has lost the trust of its allies, or our allies in the EU, etc. The Five Eyes, etc. has simply stopped trusting us. How accurate would you say that statement is? Right?
I think that's fairly accurate.
Okay.
And that really scares me because some of our allies have the ability to gather intelligence that we can't. If we need intelligence on terrorists in Ivory Coast, well, that's kind of that's an old colony of France, right? So that kind of means like we might lose out on that intelligence, especially if a country like France believes that this information might go to the wrong people, might be inadvertently or intentionally leaked to Russia. I think in some ways we kind of have damaged our reputation. I know that with certain people in the Director of National Security role, there is fear
Tulsi
that
Gabbard, we can just name them, right? We could just say who they are.
I could just name them, but certain people may not be trusted with information
Hmm.
due to their propensities to go on podcasts, right? So that's an issue, and I don't know how to fix that. I really don't. I don't know how to fix that.
Okay.
But I can tell you that in the matter of about 4 weeks, we have lost quite a few allies when it comes to trust. And my big fear that could come from this is that there may be countries in Asia who kind of look at China and think, you know what, maybe I'd have a better deal with them than the US. And that's scary because we need refueling stations. We need places where we can bring fresh food on board Navy ships. If we're going to play in the Pacific, it's a lot easier if if the Philippines or Australia is on our side, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of scary to me, and I think
Okay.
we have lost some of the trust of our allies.
Okay. $5 from the Justice 35. Thank you for $5. Ryan, would it be beneficial for Ukraine to develop a nuclear deterrent or use it defensively to end the war on Ukrainian terms?
So that's a tough question because any kind of nuclear weapon you develop is going to take quite a few resources. And kind of like playing that video game Civilization, right? Is it better to spend all of your money on a nuclear program or is it better to do conventional troops? Because a nuclear program is going to be extremely expensive to develop. And then once you develop it, you own that, right? You have to maintain those warheads. You know, a nuclear warhead, it goes through decay and little pockets of helium develop inside the pit as the warhead decays. These periodically need to be refreshed, remanufactured.
Oh, your
I think
camera.
I
Your
lost
camera.
video.
They keep cutting you out.
Yeah, I know. All right. So let me see if I can bring this back. So periodically, you need to refresh nuclear weapons. You need to put tritium back in them,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
So there's
Your
a couple of
camera's
issues with.
okay. You're getting it. Okay, good.
Yeah, am I good? There you go.
Oh, here we are.
So
Mhm.
there's a couple of issues with developing a nuclear weapon. And then kind of the issue is, well, how many can you develop? Right? It will be like South Africa, where you develop 6. Would you be able to launch these nuclear weapons before the adversary can target these nuclear weapons with their own nuclear weapons? So it's one of those things that sounds kind of good, but what are you giving up for building those nuclear weapons? That's kind of the question, right?
Fair enough.
If you sink $100 billion into building a couple of nucler weapons, it's great, but what do your barracks look like? Like what does every soldier are they able to go and train with
Cost
are they all
benefit
trained to
kind
standard,
of thing,
right? So
like
which is the bigger bang for the buck, so to speak,
Got you.
right?
20.
It might not be nuclear weapons.
Yeah, 20 SEK from Short Stack Goblin at Ryan. What anti-misinfo bot laws are needed?
I'm very reluctant to say that we need any specific kind of laws, mainly because once you start regulating speech, you go down a rabbit hole that I'm not sure I would want to go down. What you could do is you could do things like require that some people say, oh, require that you have to have a real ID in order to post things. I'm a little reluctant to do that because there's plenty of people who might be queer and they're experimenting with their sexuality and they don't want their parents to know, and there's some disadvantages to that. But you might be able to do something like pass a law which says, look, before anyone's allowed to share something, they have to have a cooldown of 30 minutes. You can only share 2 things every 30 minutes. So I don't know how that's regulating speech, but that could certainly prevent the virality of certain kinds of speech, especially when it comes to misinformation.
Interesting.
So that might be one thing that you can kind of do.
Okay.
Another thing might be to we've talked about people have talked about community notes before. That seems to be pretty darn helpful. It seems to be a way of ensuring that the truth gets out there. And it could even be as simple as, look, if you post something that's misleading, you can use AI to flag all other posts that are similar with the note that says, hey, this person said this, and here's why this is wrong. Right now, we have the tech, we have the ability to take a look at pictures that are similar and flag similar pictures that are considered misinformation.
Okay.
And flag those things as misinformation. It's just we don't do it because it reduces engagement. So something like that would either require a voluntary
buy-in
agreement among social media companies, or you'd have to put in some kind of regulation which says if you have over 1 million subscribers on whatever social media, you have to follow these kinds of rules.
Gotcha.
It's a little dangerous because, again, you're putting limits on speech. But, I'm not a lawyer. That's something that the lawyers and the politicians can work out.
Gotcha. $10 from Audacity. Hey, Ryan, were you ever a volunteer firefighter? Also,
No! Volunteer firefighter. No, I was never a volunteer firefighter. It sounds like fun. It sounds pretty interesting. No, I never. I think where I grew up, they had paid firefighters. I think, and where I live now, they have paid firefighters. So, no, never had that opportunity.
What do you make of Russia crossing the Oskil? It looks like they started working the Ukrainian supply lines and depots harder than usual.
So I'm actually not familiar that they have crossed the Oskil River. If they have, that's certainly something that needs to be taken care of on the Ukrainian side. One of the issues that Russia has is they've had a lot of trouble when it comes to maintaining these advances, striking deep into enemy territory. They kind of peter out because their logistics just they're not there yet.
Okay.
So I'm not familiar with that. I would have to research more of it.
Certainly. $5 from the Justice 35. Ryan, what is your favorite Warhammer 40K faction, and why is it Blood Angels?
I don't know Warhammer. I know like you have the Emperor and all that, and blood for the Blood God, and I have milk for the cornflakes. I don't freaking know.
Fair enough.
I don't know. I guess the humans. Because I'm a human.
$5 is
Really, I
well
don't know
spent,
enough about it to speak to that.
Okay. $5 from Dwight Baldwin. Ryan, what about the loss of trust to the U.S. from countries like Canada, who have been reluctant to spend at least 2% on defense?
Yeah, I mean, Canada needs to get their act together. They, for the longest time, they were a major partner in Afghanistan. They deployed people all over the world, and then they just kind of stopped. For their F-18s are very, very old, and they decided the one good thing Trudeau did, they agreed to buy the F-35, which is good. It's definitely a step in the right direction. But they certainly need to spend more on their military. And I hear from Canadian soldiers all the time who complain about their conditions, and their training opportunities, and even just their general conditions. I believe the Canadian Army has 2,500 active duty soldiers, whereas the New York City Police Department has like 4,200 or 42,000. I'm sorry. Canada, I believe, has 25,000 soldiers in their army, active duty, and the New York City Police Department has 42,000 police officers.
Damn.
So that kind of tells you something, right?
Puts it in
That
perspective.
maybe something's definitely off somewhere.
A little bit.
When a city has more police officers than you do in your army, and you're a country as big as Canada.
Okay, well, with that, we have gotten to the end of the discussion. I want to thank you, Ryan, for coming on and let me pick your brain, let my audience ask you a few questions. Is there anything that you want to share? Let me phrase it this way. If you had to leave the listener with one thing to come away with from the state of the world, the state of the war in Ukraine, etc., what would that one thing be and why? Go ahead.
Oh, I guess the one thing I would leave people with is that America's a pretty special place, and even if you are depressed about the way things are right now, we tend to self-correct, and damage might be done, but that damage might be able to be repaired. Um, this is still an amazing country. And as Winston Churchill said, America always does the right thing after we've exhausted all other options.
Okay, thanks for being here. Where can people find you?
RyanMcBeth.com for my books, and my YouTube channel, Ryan McBeth Programming. Instagram at The Real Ryan McBeth. That's where you can find me.
Oh, beautiful. Thanks for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Mm-hmm. What did you guys think? Get about an hour? Did you guys enjoy the show? Did I ask the right questions? It was a little up and down, right? We got on to all sorts of topics, right? I hit on most of what I wanted to cover, not all, unfortunately. I really wanted to kind of dig into the more geopolitical side of things, but he, again, didn't seem to be a politics guy. He seemed to be more of a weapons guy, which is fine, right? I really like his content, and I encourage you all, please, to go to his website, which I have in the link in my YouTube description. Click on that link and find his stuff. He does some great videos. He does some good commentary, very intelligent guy. I do want to comment before I end, because this will be a short show, right? He was my main guest for today. I wasn't going to stream today, but then he was like, I can do it Tuesday. I'm like, boom, let's do it, right? But I do want to address something that I see you guys memeing about in chat, okay? I am against hurting anyone, right, for information. I am against that. I don't want to assassinate Tim Pool. I don't want to assassinate anyone on that regard. My argumentation was to kind of illustrate, at least from my point of view, the problematic nature of targeting foreign misinformation centers and how the logic and how the reasoning used to do that could be easily applied, right? Easily turned around and applied to domestic misinformation purveyors, etc. And how that could lead to some very scary and some very bad consequences. And I was simply using my argumentation to illustrate that there is almost no difference, for example, between a Chinese TikToker getting or a bunch of people in Qatar, right, TikToking and getting people to stop a ship from leaving the port of Oakland, right, and someone in Ohio who's an American citizen who is doing the same damn thing, right? It's a dangerous precedent, in my opinion. That said, we have to have we are in an information war, and we do have to respond. But how we wage war matters. How we combat misinformation matters. And I think that there are ways to combat misinformation that aren't just bombing a foreign misinformation center, right? So yeah, I wanted to clarify that for all of you. Okay, I wanted to make sure that we got in there. 7 Canadian dollars from Jeff Lewis. Great show, Wick. I love listening to actual subject matter experts. It's fair to not want to target propagandists, but it's the battlefield of 2025. Well, like, target them how is the question. Like, I am all for if you found out that someone was being funded by Russia to spread disinformation, and you can prove that they did it knowingly, and they knew their funding was coming from Russia, etc., then I think that maybe you can do some things about that, right? Short of killing them, right? But when it comes to foreign disinformation, right, from Chinese TikTokers and things like that, I think there are steps we could take, short of bombing them into the ground. So, yeah, like I said, how we wage war matters. How we wage war matters. And then it becomes very difficult to distinguish between someone knowingly spreading misinformation or disinformation to someone who is a rube who's retweeting misinformation. It becomes really hard to distinguish these things. And I don't trust the government to do so wisely or well. They have a really bad track record at this. I don't want to give them the power to do this, right? Remember, if you guys remember back when Biden was talking about setting up a misinformation center, right? Or the board of misinformation, where they were going to target and label things with misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, etc. Malinformation, gang. Do you know what malinformation is? It's an interesting term, right? This is something that the Biden administration was discussing, and others have discussed this as well. It's a very pernicious term, and let me tell you why. So malinformation is actual information, okay? It's true. It's true information, but they call it malinformation because it's released with the intent to harm. So, for example, if you were running for Congress and someone released records of you getting arrested for drunk driving 10 years ago, and they did it on the eve before election, that's malinformation, or that would be considered malinformation. It's true, it's accurate, but it was released in order to hurt your candidacy. It was released as an attack against you. That's malinformation. And yeah, that's wild to kind of try to censor that. If it can be destroyed by the truth, it deserves to be destroyed, frankly, right? If your election candidacy can be ended because someone tells the truth about what you did, then you shouldn't be elected to Congress, right? Or to dog catcher even, right? Russell Jargoy, I'm sorry, I'm butchering your name, says it's not an attack if it's true. No, it can be an attack if it's true. It absolutely can, right? But I don't think the government should have any say in stopping that. Yeah. Salamarga says it's necessary for other countries to respect you or on some level fear you, and you don't accomplish the latter by not killing people or threatening to do so explicitly or implicitly. Fair, right? And I'm not a pacifist. But when it comes to like disinformation and misinformation and having what Ryan would call a kinetic response to that is very dangerous. It opens up if a country can now target purveyors of misinformation and disinformation, journalists become fair game. All Russia has to do is says they were spreading misinformation. We determined that they were a purveyor of misinformation. So that American journalist, we shot him. And you can't hold us responsible because you bombed that TikTok phone bank that we had. You killed our journalists. You see how that can be bad and lead to bad outcomes. Yeah, bad. Any other questions or comments on the show? Did you guys like the questions? Did I do a good job, gang? Did I do a poor job? Was there anything that you really wanted me to ask that I didn't get to ask? Anything at all? Nope. Oh, Nord Stream pipeline? Maybe. Yeah, I probably should have asked about that. I enjoyed him as a guest. I hope he liked it. Who's streaming right now? Who are we going to? Who are we going to? Pete Well One, thanks. We're streaming tomorrow. Oh, I should do the outro. Gang, if you enjoyed the show, hit that like button. Hit that subscribe. If you're watching on Twitch or on Kick, hit the follow button so you can see more of me. Yay! No, I'm going to try to get more subject matter experts. I'm going to try to get more guests who actually know what they're fucking talking about. Okay. But it's hard. It's difficult. But we try. We try. Raid Queeman. I'm not gonna raid Queeman. Let's see. Let's go to who's still going? You know what? We've not gone to let's go to Real Radhom. You guys like Real Radhom? He does Warhammer stuff. This is only applying to Twitch viewers, by the way. The rest of you, I don't know. And I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to have a debate with Andrew Mercado. We're going to have Timothy Imholt. We're going to have Quibbles. And we're going to have a cognitive dissonance. And we're going to be talking about conscription. Is conscription ever morally okay? Tune in 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow and check us out. So, but bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.